Not much has been happening on the sidelines of the what has become the COVID-19 show in Nigeria. In the absence of the hyperactive lifestyle of many Nigerians, including shopping, partying, and traveling, owing to a growing preoccupation to survive the pandemic, the economy has suffered, with the informal sector particularly affected. Labor disputes, which for most part of the past decade had been a regular feature of national life, has progressively been forgotten in the wake of the destabilization brought about by coronavirus. Now we're about to take a look at a number of developments redefining Nigeria's socio-political and economic landscape by speaking with Isa Aremu, a member of the Executive Council of the Nigerian Labour Congress and a former vice president of the organization. He is the General Secretary of the National Union of Textile Garment and Tailoring Workers of Nigeria and vice president of the Industrial Global Union. Comrade, good morning and welcome to the morning show.
Good morning, non-comrade Dr. Ruben Abachi.
Yes, well, you're welcome. Well, quickly, it was May Day the other day. I said May Day, and it was also later on May 25, Africa Day, in the time of COVID-19. Now, you as a labor leader, how do you think this pandemic is affecting the world of work, or if you like, the future of work? And what kind of measures do you think should be taken in terms of policy intervention to protect the average worker, who seems to be the main victim of this pandemic? Since we have been hearing of, layoffs and job losses, unemployment figures rising. Hello, yeah. Comrade Aremu, are you there?
Yes, I think I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, you didn't hear me previously?
Yeah, I think you can recap your
Okay, I was asking you about what has happened with regard to the world of work in the face of COVID-19, and what kind of policy interventions would you like to see to protect the worker, who seems to be the biggest victim of this crisis? Because already we've been hearing about salary cuts, the unemployment rate going up, and employers of labor saying that they have to make a choice between business continuity and other considerations. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think, Ruben, once again, good morning. Will you let me extend a compliment to all the viewers. Of course, so the working people are part of the human community, and we have been negatively impacted upon globally. There is the International Labour Organization Monitor, and at the first instance, ILO reported that about 27 to 35 million workers have lost their jobs due to lockdown, closures in response to the COVID-19. Also close to about 80 billion workers, 80 million workers worldwide have been locked down, at home because they couldn't work, parties have closed down. You know very well that even when workers were working, they were virtually living on starvation wages. You can now imagine that to be under lock and key, that becomes even worse. It has made workers completely worse off. I hope you are hearing me.
Yes, clearly.
Okay. Yeah, so what I'm saying here is that come back home to Nigeria. You have said it all. There have been layoffs. And now we are just excited that some easing is going to take place. We are allowed to return to life and livelihood. Maybe that will affect the reopening of some of the factories. And even in Lagos, where you've had some reopening for quite some time, most of the factories are not working full capacity. Instead of 3 shifts, some are running 2 shifts, 1 shift, because they need to close on time because of coughing. So what I'm saying here is that we have been negatively impacted upon in the world of work. But what is quite reassuring is that the president President Mohamed Buhari said it in his meeting address that throughout the lockdown, no worker should forfeit his or her pay. Not only that, workers should, maintain their jobs, but there's already a gap between that presidential pronouncement and what is happening in some states as well as in some private sectors. And I think the challenge is for organized labor to engage with state government, of our government at all levels, engage with businesses to make sure that we don't shift the burden of this pandemic on the working people. What we need is solidarity economics. It has to be win-win. First, we need to save lives. This is about life. Because when we are talking of 10,000 infection cases in Nigeria, I mean, these are just statistics. I think we should reduce them to human beings. They are working people. They are business people. I mean, they are our brothers and sisters. They are mothers and fathers. So we need to, first of all, preserve lives. And I think organized labor has done that campaign with the government to make sure that we obey all the protocols, social distancing. We have to maintain proper hygiene, because life first. Then the second one is about livelihood. We have to now make sure that we open businesses. And there has been a lot of very good intervention on the part of monetary and fiscal authorities. CBN, first of all, raised the stake by saying that we should turn this tragedy into opportunities. So there have been a lot of moratorium on loans for businesses. There have been also reduction of rates of interest rates. Now, the businesses have to translate this to make sure that they preserve jobs. Because government cannot be giving bailout to businesses when you are busy engaging in retrenchment and termination of workforce. That will not work. That will not be acceptable. And that is not even desirable. Because for us to get out of the pandemic, we need to ensure productivity. And you can't ensure productivity if the workers are not in place and workers are not well motivated. And this is where labor is rising up to say that government, some state government who are talking of cutting salaries, I think they should not perish because that will not work. In fact, this is the time for you to even increase the pay of the frontline workers in a way that you can motivate them to be able to defend life under this pandemic. And now, I've advised my very good friend, the governor of Kaduna State, who has done very well, on managing the pandemic. I'm based in Kaduna, and I want to bear witness that Governor Rufai has done very well to lock down, to be able to monitor contact tracing and promote awareness. Don't forget himself was also a victim, and he had to go through the regime to recover. So he has led by example. But
thank you, sir.
This good job he has done will not be sustained if he also goes ahead to be deducting salaries of workers arbitrarily. That's not acceptable. That will not work.
Thank you, sir. At this point, you're completely right. The frontline workers are essential and should be treated accordingly. This is a time for social protection, which includes wage guarantees wherever possible and vital investments in our public services. And yes, the federal government, in handing their revised budget to the National Assembly, has slashed investments in our health sector from 44.4 billion naira to 25.4 for primary health care. That is a reduction of 42.5% in health care. We've also seen them cut down the UBE funds. That's been slashed by 54.2%. And we now juxtapose this with the reduction in the budget for the National Assembly renovation complex, which has only been reduced by 25%. What does this say about the priorities of the federal government during a pandemic?
Well, I think it says, it says that we have a change, but there's no change, which is quite a paradox. We have a change in the sense that we have a pandemic in our hands that has changed lives. We have the pandemic that has impacted negatively on businesses, on jobs, and yet we have government that is still thinking the same old way. I think we need to have a new normal. The new normal is that we can't be doing the same thing that we were doing before. Don't forget that, I hope you are the one I'm talking to.
Yes, sir. It's me.
Tunu, you remember that what puts our health sector, education sector in this mess is because of decade-long of budgetary cuts, of poor funding, of poor allocation of resources, of inequitable allocation of resources, in which you give money to non-priority sectors like the National Assembly. You have already said so. How can anybody at this hour be talking of renovation when we are talking of lives and livelihood? The entire budget for that renovation should stop. Not only that, the entire budget for the National Assembly has always been equitable. How can you allocate close to almost 200 billion naira to just about 500 legislators, both the Senate and the House of Reps? If you take the budget per capita of legislators in this country, it's far, far above the national average per capita budget for Nigerian citizens. In fact, we did the calculation last time. It's in almost 3-digit millions for each senator per annum. At a time, we are just allocating just about less than 70,000 for citizens for 1 year in terms of budget per capita. So what I'm saying here is that I think it's ill-advised at this hour to cut the budget on education at a time that you need to remodel the schools now to prepare for the reopening of schools. You need to engage in sanitary fumigation of schools. You need money to do that. You need to expand the space so that we can take more pupils, for us to ensure social distancing.
Mr. Aremu, I do beg your pardon. Can you hold your thoughts while we go on a quick break, and we'll be back to discuss some more with you. Please stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Still with us is Isa Aremu, a member of the Executive Council of the Nigerian Labour Congress and a former vice president of the organization. Comrade Aremu, are you still with us?
Very well, I'm here.
Very good. Quickly, let me bring up another matter of public interest, and that is the Executive Order number 10 of 2020, which was recently signed by President Buhari to give effect to Section 121, subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution, to wit, ensuring financial autonomy for state legislatures and judiciary. Some people have described this as a game changer. Some people have said, no, the president acted ultra vires and that what he has done is illegal and unconstitutional. What do you think? Where do you stand between the two polarities?
Well, before I comment on Executive Order 10, I think let me wrap up my thoughts on this.
Okay, please go ahead.
What I'm saying here is that this uncritical, unthinking cutting of public budget. But that's exactly what landed us in before. At the time, we also have invested heavily in public health and education. No disorder about it very well during structural adjustment program. We said government had no business in we cut the budget on education and health. And now we're in a mess such that we are caught up with pandemic. We are running a cascade. We are turning hotels to isolation centers. We are begging invest centers, which my very good friend Duka did a good job in terms of security responsibility to provide it for the citizens. These are things that we also have invested on over the years. So I think under the new normal, it's not to return to the same old abnormality in which cut budget meant for public good, and then you leave the one for the elites who are engaging in all sorts of indulgences. So I want to say this is the time for more budget funding for health and education. And I know the CBN has done a very good job in that respect. There's 500 billion naira by Minister of Finance, which has been backed up by legislation. So I don't know why anybody should be cutting existing budget, which was already low. I mean, Nigerian budget, with the best of intelligence, one of the most low budget per capita in Nigeria is less than that of Ghana. I mean, less than that of South Africa. So I don't think we should engage in panic budget cutting. We should put up our creative mind and mobilize resources, which African Development Bank has done very well to make available about $10 billion for us to address the pandemic. So that's it on that. Now, on the Executive Order 10, is that so? I hope I got it right, which gives autonomy to the state legislators, and judiciary. I think for me, Ruben, that's also very, very innovative. But I want to say it's revolutionary. Because in our frustration, we've been calling for restructuring of the federation. And as you say, in the Ilorin, what you are looking for in Sokoto, what you are looking for, you don't need to reinvent the way thinking of how to restructure the economy. Nigerian constitution already gives some leeway for us to restructure. What we need to do is to practice the true spirit of the constitution, which allows for federation. We have the federal government, we have the state government, we have the judiciary. And we have seen over the time that in terms of the federal structure, things have been working very well. The money for judiciary and federal level is first line charge. For legislature, it's the same thing at the first line charge. What is good for the federal is also good for the state. And now I'm happy the president has used the executive power, which is constitutional. He has the right to have the executive power. Because if you throw it open to say you are amending the constitution and also, some of these imperial governors will definitely block them. And I think it's good that the president has done so. And we cannot pick and choose, Ruben. This government has not, this president has given us executive order on how to the ease of business, executive 001, 002, the patronage of Nigeria, executive 003. There's one on, you need to remind me, there's one on the patronage of local goods. So if we commend that one
on offshore assets.
Yeah, so we cannot pick and choose. So the one on executive 10 is timely, it's welcome, and I think it's going to deepen the whole spirit and content of federation better. Let's also be having that kind of things that we're having at the federal level. I look forward to one day in the states where governors will be summoned to account for some of his or her actions, where commissioners will be summoned the way we are summoning the ministers, at the federal level, because for the state executive, legislature to do that, they must be financially independent. They shouldn't be rely on the whims and caprices of governors, because most of them will never make resources available in any way. In fact, the use resources are soon for undermining the institutions of democratic structure at the state level. So if you ask me, I think this is one executive order that is timely and it's consistent with the other timely executive order the president has given before to cover the issue of ease of businesses or patronage of goods, even on anti-corruption. I think that's one of the orders that also be carried out along that line. And I think it's constitutional. The president has the right to invoke his executive power to do so. What we can interrogate is the quality of that order and the quality of this present order. Nationally, there is a general acclaim for it that is timely, it's worthwhile.
Thank you, sir. Now, the Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, has threatened to drag ASUU to court because ASUU, he claims, is not responding to his invitations to negotiate. Does he have a case here? What are your thoughts?
Well, if you ask me, I've spent close to 32 years in the trade union movement. I'm rounding up this year, and I think, let me also tell you, I'm the former General Secretary of Textile Workers Union, where I still remain the Vice President of Industrial Global Union. Also, I'm permanently member of National League. I can share my thoughts with you to say that, you see, in the court, throughout my 30 years of trade union movement, when you go to court, what you get is judgment. You don't get justice. So the best way to handle labor crisis, to engage in social dialogue, is to be able to negotiate, be able to reason together. And I think all the two parties must find a common ground. And I want to say that, and here, let me sound very new normal. New normal is the new language. I would like to advise the minister to make sure that he can't be tired of persuading ASUU to come back to the negotiation table. There should be also better offer to the table so that they come. But also ASUU must reciprocate. I've argued before, ASUU has become so predictable, in the approach to trade unionism. And when I mean predictable, if ASUU doesn't go on strike, that will be the news. If you go on strike, everybody knows so. I think it would be nice for us to look at the bigger picture. And I've argued it before. There are two kinds of disputes in trade union movement. If you have disputes of rights, which means a worker has not been paid, you are denied your pay, you don't need any story. You should just write because only monkeys would work for any employer that did not pay on time. Or if you have disputes of interest, things like, how do they call it, this IPPS, payment monitoring system, want more funding for the educational sector. I think you also need an approach that doesn't not lead to work stoppage. And I want to say so, especially during pandemic, with not so much grants, many countries are still going to school. Now, Nigeria, we have not even talked of timetable for resumption. Ruben, you remember that before COVID-19, UNESCO reported that 13 million children are out of school in Nigeria. As I'm talking to you now, about 120 million students are out of school in West Africa. About 100 million of them, they are from Nigeria. Now, how do we get out of illiteracy? How do we drive development when we don't develop human resources? So everybody needs solidarity. We need sacrifice. And I think we should be able to engage ourselves, so that rather than treating ourselves as enemies. So they versus us should not work now. So I want to advise the minister, rather than rushing to court, please return back to court of engagement with ASU. ASU should also reciprocate. And I think we should, if there is a will, there will be the way to find a way out of it. I also learned that they've agreed to pay the ASU, the academic staff, people are disagreed with government before you don't deny workers their pay. Academics, people, regardless of the quarrel, So if you return that, if they pay them, then I think that you should return to the negotiation table in a way that we'll be able to have a win-win situation out of this crisis. But the court, with all due respect to my friends who are lawyers, that okay, they only give judgment, they don't give justice.
Well, quickly,
and it's very the word of work.
Quickly, before we go, we have just about 60 seconds or thereabouts. You wrote recently that the ADB, African Development Bank, should be a bank by Africans only for Africans. Did you make that statement, which seemed to undermine the contributions of the non-regional members because of the politics of Akinwumi Adesina's re-election?
No, I wouldn't make that statement to undermine anybody. I make that comment for Africa to reclaim what is our bank. The original mandate for the bank, there are two charters that were given out in 1963. The first charter established Organization of African Unity, which became the African Union. The second one, the vision of our founding father, is that we must develop the continent. The second one established the African Development Bank. So up to 1983, it was purely for Africans. So what I want to say is that we opened up in 1982, to allow for foreign investment, and that's what brought America and other countries in. I think this is now the time. Any country that wants to use the financial muscle to dictate the terms of running what is purely an African bank, we have to find a way to revisit the charter and exclude those countries. And let me tell you, America is an exception, especially under Donald Trump. That this is a deviant administration, which doesn't see anything good beyond what America wants. It talks of American first. So why will Africa not talk of African first? And in this case, who is complaining about additional leadership? Certainly not Africans. Africans are happy that ADB has given 10 billion naira for us dollars to cope with COVID crisis, COVID-19 crisis. And you had the Secretary of Treasury of the United States complaining that ADB lends money quickly. Who is complaining?
Well, thank you very much.
That's the whole idea that bank should run development for the continent.
Thank you very much. On that note, who is complaining? We just have to thank you and move on.